All right, Ryan Nurse, thank you so much. I'm also getting word at this time that the AP has suggested that the U.S. Senate will remain in Republican control. Earlier in the night, we said that the U.S. House of Representatives would remain in Republican control. This would mean that Republicans will have both houses of Congress. All right, with that, I'm going to send things over to Andrew Joyce. Andrew, talk me through it. What does that mean?
All right, well, I think we could probably have predicted after some of these dismal results for Democrats that the Senate was going to remain in Republican control. As far as Hillary Clinton's outlook goes, there is still a chance. We're looking at about the same map we had before. It's a little bit more dire for Hillary Clinton, but we're going to game out just what those last scenarios are in which she could still take this. So you guys tell me a little bit about what's going on in the Rust Belt here. This is a lot more red than all the pictures we saw before the election. What does Hillary Clinton need to do in these 3 states?
She's got to win all 3. She's got to run the table, and she's probably got to run the table by a reasonable amount. I have every bit of confidence that if somehow the Clintons pulled off the popular vote and lost the Electoral College, that they would fight this to the death. So maybe, you know, even if she can run up the numbers, but the truth of the matter is, if you look at Pennsylvania right now, and certainly if you look at Wisconsin, the gap in Wisconsin is huge. It's 4 or 5 percentage points. I don't know who she could get. She could bring back, you know, Milwaukee and Madison and Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers. She could get the whole everybody possible. I don't know that she can bridge that gap in Wisconsin, but it's still those 3 same states.
So let's say she loses Wisconsin then. Let's knock that one off the board for her. What's her best case scenario then?
So she loses Wisconsin. There's a couple of paths, though though both are unlikely. One is that she could win Maine and the 2nd Congressional District in Maine, win New Hampshire, and win Pennsylvania, win Michigan, and get to 269.
And we should note that that congressional district right now, the Republican, it hasn't been called yet, but the Republican is leading his opponent by around 10 points with more than 70% of the vote in.
And it seems unlikely that Clinton would run ahead in that district, given what we're seeing in the industrial Midwest. And so I think that's one path. It's unlikely. The other path is winning Arizona, and then still needs to win Pennsylvania. And so I think this is not super likely as well. I think the paths have constrained, and the big reason why is underperformance in the Midwest and in Pennsylvania.
So can I ask you guys a question a little bit about that weird scenario up here in Maine? Let's say that it comes down to that. Let's say that she pulls it off in Michigan, she pulls it off in Pennsylvania, and she loses Arizona and Wisconsin, but then she loses that one district up in Maine, and that one electoral vote is what calls it. Nebraska and Maine have this weird system, right, where they apportion part of their electoral votes by congressional district. And I think when they passed those laws at the time, the sort of like political commentariat had their, talked about it, but we never really gamed out the implications of that. What do you guys think about those laws, and do we need to change them in the future if we really want this to be a representative election?
I've never had a problem with the Electoral College because I think it ends up requiring people to actually campaign in different places that they wouldn't campaign in otherwise. If all you had to do was just get raw numbers, the candidates would only go to every major city, and they wouldn't go to Southern Illinois, and they wouldn't go to different parts of Ohio. I don't think, and this is something that I will probably never say again, I don't think the problem is the system. I think in this instance, you just have a campaign that surprised people. It surprised people structurally. We don't know how it's finally going to play out. But, again, even if you get a popular vote electoral college split, that would still indicate that Hillary Clinton underperformed, that Donald Trump overperformed, and that this is our first election without the Voting Rights Act, and that also played a role.
So there was a rumor, or not a rumor, news reports actually, that in Washington State this year there may be a faithless elector. Let's say that this really comes down to the wire, and this one individual in Washington State who would otherwise be an elector for Hillary Clinton who says he will not vote for Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump tips the election. Why can they still do that? Why is that a thing that the Electoral College, why is it not required that our electors in the Electoral College vote for the person who the state goes for?
Boy, that would be the most bizarre end to this election cycle.
And we should give some context that this individual is a Native American who feels that Hillary Clinton hasn't done enough for the tribes in America. He doesn't support either Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. He supported Bernie Sanders in the primary, so we'll put that out there.
Yeah, and I think there's a fine that they had originally set. I think it was like $10,000. It was
$1,000, I think.
Fine, yeah.
Which I imagine when it was set was considered to be a prohibitive fine. So I think the idea was not that electors would make a different choice, and so I think that would be entirely unprecedented. But I also think it's also pretty unlikely.
Could we see the opposite? Could we see a number of, let's say, Republican faithless electors who might say, you know, because if Hillary Clinton ends the day with less than 270 electoral votes, a few faithless electors for Donald Trump wouldn't hand the election to Hillary Clinton.
Right.
It would hand the election to the House of Representatives. I mean, there's no precedent for that, but the's also no precedent for this election.
No, exactly. I mean, they could, and we could end up having a vote going on in the House. I mean, there's 100. It could be like, you know, like Veep on HBO. I mean, it could happen, right? I just don't think it's necessarily all that likely. And again, I think it's really important if we start breaking down these numbers and looking at these differences. And I think this is very important to say because it was also something that people didn't anticipate in Michigan, in Wisconsin, in Pennsylvania. But you got to be honest. The Gary Johnson-Jill Stein vote has turned out to pretty much be the percentage difference that Hillary Clinton is losing by right now. Now, we don't know if all those voters would have gone to her, or if they would have gone to Trump, or if they wouldn't have voted at all. But that also is playing a role in those 3 swing states.
And how do you guys think that that's going to affect people's opinions of how third party? But really, we saw this with Nader in 2000, right? And people still to this day vote for third party candidates. They still don't consider them spoilers. Especially when you have so much outrage on, let's say, the left, the American left, with the way that you try and disrupt things within the electoral system. Like, I mean, are people in Florida still going to be voting for Jill Stein? And
my sense is that if the map plays out the way that it's drawn up here, I think there's going to be a lot of people who are going to wake up who are going to be awfully surprised at how this election turned out. We've seen it internationally. I think we'll see it here as well.
The American Brexit.
That's right.
And I'll say this right now. I have a crisp $20 bill for anybody in a Jill Stein or Gary Johnson T-shirt. I dare them to walk through Northern Virginia after this election. I swear, because you know, it's funny. I was just texting with a former student of mine in California, and she's like, "Well, I voted for Jill because I'm in California. It doesn't matter." I'm like, "That's not what this narrative is going to be. If Hillary Clinton ends up losing this election, there are going to be lots of angry people looking for someone to blame, and they're going to be looking at third-party people."
Amen. Well, we need a fun portmanteau for like Rust Belt exit. Someone will have to come up with that. But in the meantime, we'll kick it back to Alicia. Thank you.
All right, you guys.